Hey everybody, it's Paul from Alexandria Knife Sharpen and Laser Engraving. I wanted to do a quick podcast on a recent change I decided to make. I don't even know it. I wouldn't really call it a change. I would call it an addition. But I decided after using my 3D printer that I bought way back on Black Friday. I think I mentioned to you guys that I bought an inexpensive 3D printer, and I was really intrigued with the fact that I was seeing some things about like things to come in the future and where things are now. And I've had my eye on 3D printers for a long time. I didn't jump in years ago, but I thought I thought the concept was pretty cool. And then I decided, finally around Black Friday of this past year, I saw a really great deal on an Anacubic one, and I decided I would buy it. And then it literally sat in the box for months until my move. And even then, after I moved, it wasn't until just a couple weeks ago that I opened it up and started using it to make all kinds of, interesting things. And I've shown some of them. I, made an addition to my 2x42 to fill a gap in for the angle guide. Cool little, this is like a adjustable crank lever for the laser engravers if I have to put support under something. I mean, there's just no shortage of cool things that you can do with these. But I decided that I wanted to get a really good one. Started doing tons of research, looking into them, checking out the different companies. And one of the first things I ran into was there seemed to be like a big controversy going on. It's basically like Bamboo Labs versus the world, kind of is the best way I can put it to you. So here's my take on it. This is just, again, a person with very limited 3D printing experience from watching a ton of videos, listening to guys that are on YouTube that I would say are experts in 3D printing and have been doing it for years. Here's kind of what I took away from it all. So it seems that 3D printing, like a lot of other things in computers and stuff like that, came from an area that was very much freeware, shareware, and everything was open sourced, and guys were like in the very beginning. And I know this because I think a buddy of mine did this. He was building his own 3D printer, and in the beginning of these things, which I think goes back to probably close to 7 years ago, you literally had to build the entire machine, and it sounded like it was just a nightmare unless it had to be one of those things you really wanted to tinker with. You got to like building stuff, dealing with the programming side of things. It seems that's where they have evolved from. So they've always been this kind of open source with guys can go in and modify stuff and change things. And so I understand, like what happened was basically the leading company that, at least I think they're probably the leading company. And I could be wrong because, like I said, I know a little bit about the industry, not a ton, but the leading company, from what I can see, at least maybe commercial sales wise, seems to be Bamboo Labs. And they did some things that kind of made some of their software, I guess, proprietary and not as open source. And they claimed that, I guess at first, that it was for security reasons and this and that. There was a backlash, it looks like, from these guys that, have been doing this for years. They didn't like it. And I know, like, even the guy that I've mentioned many times who I follow, Sam from Samcraft, he had a few concerns, but only because he runs a print farm. If you're doing print farming stuff and you got, multiple machines running, you might want to be running your own software and tweaks and different things to it. Didn't seem to affect him at all. I mean, he's still, he's running Bamboo A1s in his print farm, which appear to be one of the best affordable, inexpensive 3D printers out there. So I started looking at, and I've done some business with Creality before, way back, and I knew that they were also a big name in 3D printers. Kind of torn between like, well, maybe I'll go with Creality. I've done business with them before. I did a review of the 22 watt Creality Falcon 2. There's some other big names out there. I think it's Persa might be one. There's a particular one that's quite expensive, even more expensive than some of the Bamboo Labs stuff, that has a very good reputation for being really well built, and there's quite a few players. And then if you get into Amazon, there's Flash Forge. They also are a big Creality seller of these printers. And I was like, well, you know what? First I started thinking like, well, what is it that I want to do? And I had two visions in mind. Right up front, I'll tell you, everybody, like, I am not looking to have a print farm. Okay. Zero interest in a print farm type of thing. That's not why I'm looking at it for my business. One, I don't know that I would even be good enough to design jigs and things that people want to buy necessarily myself, at least not at this point. I'm nowhere near like, oh, I'm going to go buy 25 of these things, put them all on this wall and just start printing 3D products. But what I did have a kind of inclination that I think there might be a very good use for or need for, and it's kind of along the lines with laser engraving. As I've mentioned before with my laser engraving, I don't really and have never really focused on the product side of things. I am consumer centric laser sharpening, which means I focus on people need something laser engraved, they bring it to me to get it laser engraved. I haven't concerned myself with like, oh, I'm going to make this and then I'm going to sell it on Etsy, or I didn't want to compete with the Etsy stuff, and I really didn't have any desire to do it. Years ago, I used to have a really huge Amazon and eBay store for a product that I actually made, and I sold tons and tons of them, and I've done that, and I really didn't have an interest in getting back into doing any kind of thing that was going to involve me shipping out tons of units and things like that. I wanted a 3D printer, a really good one for my own use, but I also was like, I still think the use for this would be just like my lasers, and that would be consumer-centric 3D printing service that's local. And I don't see a lot of that. There are online places where you can go and have a file remotely printed somewhere. That exists. There's plenty of print farms that sell products, like my buddy at Sam at Samcraft. But I don't see, at least in my area, anybody that's offering 3D printing like I offer laser engraving. Like, hey, maybe you saw something or you bought an STL file and you just want to have one thing printed, or somebody maybe wants a toy printed for their kid, or what I envisioned. And this is why I really dug into looking into what was available out there. So what really impressed me with the Bamboo Labs was they have kind of the two top end 3D printers that they just came out with. The one is the H2. It's super new. It's got lasers, it's got cutters, it's got dual heads in it. I could care less about the lasers or the cutters. And I even have a friend that does 3D printing who had mentioned that he was a little concerned that even having a laser inside of a 3D printer might put too much particulate in the area, and you don't want to get, stuff into your 3D print. Some of that made sense to me too. And I was like, you know what? I kind of like that idea. Like, I don't need a laser and a 3D printer that are a combo unit. And I've also always noticed with my lasers, I, in the beginning, was buying lasers that were like these multi-use lasers, but what ended up being more useful to me were single-use lasers. Yeah, I have several lasers that can do lots of different things. They can do tumblers. Some of them have two lasers in them, one for doing metal, one for doing soft materials. The time that it takes to reset them up for doing these other things in a shop where I'm getting a lot of products and doing things for people wasn't worth the effort. And that's kind of how I was looking at this. The H2 3D printer is like, yeah, you know what? It's cool that it does all these other things, but I I don't need all those other things because I could already do those things in my shop. I got laser cutters in here. I have engravers in here. The laser was only a 10 watt anyway. I have, far superior lasers to a little 10 watt. And if I wanted to laser engrave some PLA or whatever filament I was using, I got plenty of lasers to be able to do that. I started leaning towards the X1 carbon printer. And the reason I liked it is because of the wide array of filaments it can print. And here's what I think is really cool. And this is what I was looking into to see where things were going. So there's some really amazing filaments coming out. They're just constantly coming out with new ones. They range in strength, they range in their abilities to do stuff, they range in their heat resistance. And there are some that you can literally make car parts for. So they are so heat resistant and so strong and UV resistant and all this other stuff. Hence why the X1C, the C stands for carbon. One of the first things they started doing was filament that's embedded with carbon fibers. It makes it stronger. To print some of these more advanced filaments, you need a pretty high-end 3D printer. It has to have a hardened steel tip because a lot of them only have aluminum tips. Like my little Anacubic over there, I'm sure only has probably an aluminum tip on it. It wouldn't be able to go hot enough to print some of these more advanced filaments. It's not enclosed in anything. It doesn't matter for PLA or PETG. They don't smell when they or off gas, any kind of stuff. But some of these advanced filaments that have, different things and stronger plastics and things, you do need filtration. You don't want to be breathing them in. That's why you're seeing a lot of these 3D printers that are completely enclosed units with filtration in them. And that was my thought. I've done jobs we have a very big thing of guys that collect classic cars that meet every Sunday at a shopping center very close to me here. I have done laser engraving jobs for guys. I did one for a Ferrari. I think I showed that where he needed a little panel piece for some switches he put it in, and he wanted that piece engraved, and I did the engraving for that. Well, one of the really cool things with 3D printers is their ability to make parts, and you can make car parts for, plastic car parts. I mean, it's just nuts, like where it's going. There's a company that is making 3D printed sneakers. Like they're just selling the design. You print the sneaker yourself. Like you can actually make your own sneaker. And that's what's so neat about these different filaments. I mean, some of them are soft and flexible and springy and probably the same exact material that's already used in sneakers. They just run this, full gamut. You have ones that are injected with wood and wood fiber, so they look like wood. You have ones, I've even seen ones that if you wanted something to look rusty, it will rust. I mean, you just name it. They're just out there. And then there's all these, exotic ones that are like super hard, super heat resistant. Now, some of them are pretty expensive too. Some of those ones that you would probably use for a car part that are the strongest, hardest, heat resistant, chemical resistant to everything. They can be, typically a roll of PLA or PETG. They run around $19. You see them on sale. And I've also been warned, if you see them really, really cheap, you probably don't want it. It's probably not good stuff or will clog your printer. That it seems to be that anywhere from about $15, $16 and up is usually the better quality stuff. And I've always been warned, like, beware of anything that's too cheap. But some of these exotic ones can be expensive. So like I saw one, it was $150 for a 1 kilogram spool of this stuff. That's not cheap, but if you think about it, if you're making like some type of pretty good sized plastic part for probably not a Model T. I don't know if it's got any plastic parts in it, but say an older 1970s car that they can't get a particular part for. I'm sure no problem. You could probably get 150, 200, maybe even more for printing out that piece for somebody. If it's a really big piece, and then it just gets crazy. Like there's also these people that are into cosplay that make these really funky costumes. They make them a lot of times out of PLA. And that could be probably tons of printing. I don't know if I'd be looking to do that, but like for me, it would be more like somebody wants a car part printed. and has the STL file, has everything, and they just need it printed. So that's what I'm gonna look towards possibly offering after I see how things go with the new printer. So that's the direction I'm going. I'm going to be adding one Bamboo Labs X1 carbon printer to the shop. I'll still have my little Anacubic. I'm not getting rid of that. That thing's been fun. Now, I will say this, and this is interesting. If you haven't done any 3D printing or you're thinking of getting into it, it was kind of funny. It was somebody said it's the most fun and most frustrating hobby you will ever get into. Can definitely see where that was like early on with you will hear guys talk about, hey, when we first started, these guys that have been doing it for 7-8 years, especially the guys that were building their own units, they were like, the majority of the things you printed didn't work out. Like they failed constantly. And I had pretty good experience with my little Anacubic Neo over here. It's a Cobra 2 Neo until I downloaded a file, like a free file, and it had some G code in there, which is basically what tells it where it's going and stuff. Sometimes you learn things out the hard way. It apparently had G code that was for a different printer. It slammed my print head like down into the bed where, everything's, and it knocked everything out of alignment. So my printer went from out of the box printing everything I put in there perfectly to not printing anything at all. I was like, oh my God, did I break it? What did I do here? What I realized was it knocked the Z-axis off. It knocked a bunch of things off. It knocked the alignment of the head off. I ended up having to change the nozzle out. I changed the nozzle to another one that was in there. And after a whole bunch of troubleshooting, I got it running again. Lesson learned there. Make sure that the files that you're using don't have G code in them for, a different printer. Apparently that can be bad. The other reason I'm looking at this Bamboo Labs printer is because they have a really great reputation for just running really well. To go back to what I started at in the very beginning, I'm not a guy who's going to be writing his own code or caring about open source stuff, because I'm never going into, the software for my 3D printer and changing anything, because all I would do is screw it up, because I don't know anything about that stuff. I don't know anything about programming. The fact that it has a great reputation, the fact that they're making some of their stuff closed and not wide open makes zero difference to me. I want a printer that's going to run fantastic, that's not going to have problems. I'm not going to be tinkering around with their software anyway, so I could care less about that. And I kind of feel like I think that's going to be the direction that you're going to see a lot of this stuff go anyway. If you start watching any of these videos, guys that are doing 3D printing, and you see some of the Bamboo Lab bashing going on, just keep in mind what I told you. These are guys that have come from open source stuff. They've been building 3D printers. Some expected backlash there, but I can also totally understand when you're the leading company wanting to possibly keep some of your stuff proprietary and keeping everybody else from copying what you're doing. You look at this new H2 printer, which sounds like it's fantastic. There's a tiny part of me that's like, oh, maybe I should have got the H2, because I think you can get it without the laser. It is a little bit bigger. So there is a part of me that's like, should I got that? Should I got that one? I decided to go with the X1C. Hopefully it's a good choice. Was not inexpensive. I spent right around $2,000 total between, now granted that's with that big box of PLA, all those different PLAs in there. I added some different plates, like smooth plates and textured plates, and some accessories to it. I did get the one that has multiple colors, so that these new 3D printers, the little one I got over there can only print one color, can't do anything fancy. This one can use like support filaments and you can have 4 different filaments in there. And I think with certain softwares and things, you can actually have like some crazy amount. I think it's like 10 filaments or something. Probably, again, something I'll probably never do. I could see doing a couple colors. I was watching Sam from Samcraft. He actually got the H2 and he was printing with it. He actually had an X1C also. I think he got both of them from Bamboo Labs. He was printing some, key rings with 2 colors in them with his logo in there and stuff. So there's a lot of cool things that they can do. That's it. That's today's update. I won't run this too long. Most approaching 30 minutes here, and I'll end this here. I do have some other very cool things coming up this week. I'm going to be doing a review of. I'm starting several reviews of TS Prof gear. So they did send me some very cool things, and we have a big sale coming up. Keep your eye out for a review coming out. It's going to be very soon. It will be this week. A particular TS Prof item that is going to have a very big sale in April. And then what else do we got going? That PD Tools CBN wheel also, again, that thing's working out great. So I'm just going to put all his contact info in there. You guys can kind of look at that. They gave me their website. I find the website to me seems like it's more informational than necessarily store and where to get stuff. I'll try and get more out of them in email and see if I can get some clarification there. And just to wrap this up, there was one other thing I wanted to mention of why I did this right now, and that has to do with the pending tariffs. One of the things I did notice that happened real quick was these 3D printers jumped up in price a good bit. Like there was over, I think this one was about $200 to $300 less that I purchased a month ago. So you can see those tariffs are already starting to affect things. And I wanted to get a really good one here before I ended up in a situation where, they could skyrocket until that tariff situation gets worked out. And I didn't want to have to be waiting, 6 months, a year, or anything like that. That's the other thing. The other thing that I have been working on, I'm right now corresponding with two different companies. One was the one I told you about, the PD Tools, and another company. Neither of them are in China, about CBN wheels and Tormek stuff. I will share all that with you guys in future stuff, but I am trying to work out some good sources for CBN at good, affordable prices that are well made. In the interim, should we run into any long-term issues with getting affordable CBN, because I have a feeling that the Chinese market for CBN is probably going to turn south and not be very good for a while. Not that we were always getting the highest quality stuff from there anyway, so this may be better in the long run anyway. So we'll see how that all works out. But that was the reason that I kind of moved on this. I had just finished doing my taxes, paying everything. Business did real well. Had the money and decided, you know what, I'm going to jump in before this thing keeps going up and up and up. And before I didn't want to get to a situation where these things doubled in price with a 150% tariff and some of these crazy numbers that we hear being thrown around with tariff prices. So, all right, so that's it. And I will talk to you soon. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you later.